All right, everybody. It is now 10 o'clock. So, good morning. I am Aaron Blumberg, Swiftland's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome to this morning's webinar, R is for Respect. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Linda Bruno. Linda has been developing and conducting training workshops for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers workshops on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her workshops based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life application. Linda is also certified with DDI and Achieve Global. Please welcome Linda and enjoy our webinar this morning. Linda?
Thank you so much, Erin, and welcome everybody to R is for Respect, another in our Diversity Discovery Institute series. I always try to say that very slowly so that I don't get it backwards. Diversity Discovery Institute. If you have your handouts in front of you that were emailed as an attachment to the link for the webinar, at the top of the handout, I love the saying that Bryant McGill has. One of the most sincere forms of respect is actually listening to what another has to say. I don't think Bryant McGill is famous or anything like that, but when I was looking for quotes, just because I love to have quotes that speak to me, this one spoke to me because I think listening has so much to do with respect. And what I'm finding more and more is that people are listening less and less. The more texting we do, the more instant messaging we do, even with email, the more organizations use chat boxes for their problem solving. For instance, if you call a computer company, you can chat to them instead of talking to them. I have found that people aren't even listening in a chat typed area. So I think listening is one of the things, and you will hear that later this morning as well. But I think listening is one of the best ways we can show respect for people. So I love this topic. I just think it's so important for us to think about how we respect or disrespect. And I know that nobody in the room intentionally disrespects anybody they interact with, whether that's their patrons or their coworkers or their supervisor or anybody else they interact with. But it's so easy to do that if you're not showing respect for those people. So as you know, the first thing I like to do is look up an actual definition and see, I know what it means, but to put it in words, sometimes it's easier to come up with a definition that somebody else has come up with. And Merriam-Webster.com defines respect as a feeling or understanding that someone or something is important or serious or whatever and should be treated in an appropriate way. So an understanding that someone is important. That pretty well wraps it up, doesn't it? We could almost pack our bags and go home right now because everybody that walks into your library is important. Period. It doesn't matter what diversity comes into your library. Every individual is important. Every coworker you work with is important. Every family member is important, even if they aggravate you and get on your nerves. So it's about valuing them as a person, isn't it? And that's what respect really comes down to. They didn't use the word value in this definition, but I think you could say respect is a feeling or understanding that someone or something is important and should be valued. Not only treated in an appropriate way, which is a given, but also shown value as a human being. That's how you show respect. And when you're talking about libraries, shown value as your patrons, right? Because if you don't have patrons, you don't have libraries. So in that sense, they're valuable even more to you, not only as a human being, which should be automatic, but also as your patron to keep your library in the community. B says there are two sides of respect. We need to earn the respect of patrons and coworkers, and I would add, and supervisors, by genuinely caring about them and their feelings. And if you don't, I'm very much an optimist. I'm very much a positive person. But if you truly don't care about the people that come into your library, you may be in the wrong job. I'm just going to say that outright and be blunt about it. I was in a program, it's probably been a couple years ago, and we were talking about customer service. And I said, so what do you think of when a patron walks into your library? And one of the fellows in the group leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, folded his arms, and said, I think here comes another idiot. And I was speechless, folks. I did not know how to respond to that. I finally, after I caught my breath, smiled and said, "Are you sure you're in the right job?" And I just then dismissed it and went on with something else. But truly, I felt like somebody needed to counsel him. Yes, exactly, Luli. Whoa. I felt like somebody needed to counsel him. It wasn't in my place. I had never met him before. I didn't know who his supervisor was, but he was serious. He, throughout the program, it was only a half a day program, but throughout the program, he made comments like that. And I would always try to draw it around to, I think this isn't a good fit for you, or maybe it's time to look at something else, or whatever, because all I could imagine was how those people felt when they came into his library, and how his coworkers felt having to be around that all the time. Because we know that that spreads, doesn't it? Exactly, Tony, or Anthony, I don't know which one you prefer, but some people are not meant to work with the public, and it amazes me how they can't figure that out for themselves. That, they spew that out on other people without realizing they need to go someplace else. So that is something that, now, can you develop caring? I believe you can. It's called emotional intelligence. And some of us have personalities that don't lend themselves to be really warm and fuzzy. Others are naturally warm and fuzzy. I'm not a warm and fuzzy feeling person. So I work on genuinely caring about people. And I'm going to go back to the first thing we said, and that is about listening. It's one of the areas that I need to really focus on because of my personality. I'm a get it done kind of person. And if you're talking slowly or you're going into deep detail and that's very important to you, I have over the past several years really worked on trying to focus intently, listen to you, and show you that respect. It does not come naturally all the time, but it's something we can work on. So one of the things we can do to earn the respect of patrons, coworkers, supervisors, our board, our dean, whomever we might be involved with, academic, public, medical, libraries, etc., is to actually genuinely care about them. And then we show respect by expressing gratitude, consideration, and valuing their worth. First thing we said, they're valuable. They're important. We express gratitude. They don't have to come to the library, do they? They can go to Amazon. They can go on the internet. They can go to Barnes & Noble. They can go to individual bookstores. They can go to other libraries. And I hear that not frequently, but it's not rare either, that people will come up to me, library people will come up to me and say, I don't use my closest library to my home. I go to another library because they're friendlier and I feel like they value me more. Wow. So it's very important. That's how we show respect to people. Express gratitude for them being there, consideration for what they're experiencing in our building, and then valuing their worth, not just as a patron, but also as a person. How do we do that? One of the things we can do is appreciate their business. We can say thank you, can't we? Would somebody type into the chat box the first thing that you think of that you can thank them for? There are lots of things, and there are no right or wrong answers. It could be something totally different than what I've ever thought of. Yes, thank you for coming to the library. You want them to know that you're glad they're there. Exactly, Jan and Genevieve. Yes, and Luli too, walking in so the doors can stay open. And Abby, same thing. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for supporting your library. That's what keeps us viable in our community. That's what people like to hear. They want to know you appreciate them coming in. I bet if we were face to face and I said, would you raise your hand, and you can do it now if you want, but how many of you have walked into a place of, I'm just going to call it a place of business. It could have been a service organization. It could have been a nonprofit. It could have been a medical facility, a retail, whatever. In the last 30 to 60 days, and nobody has said thank you to you. I bet every one of us could raise our hands if we thought about it for just a minute. Because people, yes, exactly. And isn't that frustrating? And you certainly do not feel respected, do you, when you leave there? It's as if you are taken for granted, taken advantage of, ignored, disrespected, all of the above. And when I experience that, leave there thinking, gosh, I'm not going to come back here unless I'm forced to. And sometimes I'm forced to. Maybe it's the only source of something or whatever. But otherwise, I'll go someplace that I feel respected. And I think probably most of you will too. Abby says it's the easiest thing to do. Businesses, including doctors, will lose business. Absolutely. Went into a doctor's office. Abby reminded me of this, but I'm going to show you how this disrespect is so subtle sometimes from their perspective, from the people showing it. my husband had a doctor's appointment for a procedure, and they wanted to do a meet and greet on a Saturday. And I thought, well, that's really nice of them to set that up on a Saturday so that they can see everybody. His appointment was at 9:30. We got there at 25 after 9. There were 8 people sitting in the waiting room ahead of us. His appointment was in 5 minutes. We looked at each other and thought, okay, maybe this is just really quick and they just get your history. And so we sat there for a half an hour, and he needed to get going. And I said, and he was getting madder and madder. And I said, we don't have to stay here. But people think because it's a doctor, right, Abby, that we have to stay there. I said, we don't have to stay here. So he walked up to the desk, and he said, and I walked with him, and he said, how long is it going to be? My appointment was at 9:30. And she said, well, there are a couple more people ahead of you out here, and there are a couple people ahead of you in the back. So you're going to be out here for another 15 to 20 minutes, and I don't know how long you'll be in the back. And he said, then I just need to cancel this appointment. She said, okay, we'll reschedule. And she grabbed her book or her computer or whatever. I can't remember. And he said, no, I'm not rescheduling. And I said, we would like all of his documentation back. So she was flipping over all the papers they had copied, and she flipped over the copy of his driver's license to keep it in her folder. And I said, was that his driver's license? And she said, yes. And I said, I'd like that back. And she said, well, that's for our records. And I said, you don't need any records because he's not your patient. And I'm not usually that irritable, but I felt so disrespected. And Abby said she's walked out of a doctor's office and told the primary I would never go back there again. She could get the results of a test for me, and he now has a whole new staff. But sometimes they never get it, do they? So it can be a library, okay, if you're the person showing that disrespect for them and not appreciating the fact that they came in. You can appreciate things like their patience, their understanding, their help, their attitude. Mrs. Smith, every time you come in, you have a smile on your face, and that just influences the whole atmosphere of our library. Do you think Mrs. Smith is going to make sure she smiles the next time she comes in? Yeah. And you're not going to do it to be manipulative, but there is a saying, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And if you tell Mrs. Smith you appreciate her smile, she's going to try to remember that the next time and do the same thing for you. There are a lot of things you can show appreciation for, and by so doing, you also show respect, don't you? So any of those, patience, help, attitude, whatever it might be, just coming in the door, their support of your library, because times are tough. And they're not going to get a lot easier, are they, for libraries as far as competition goes? There's always going to be somebody out there, especially with the internet now. And the funny thing is, people think that anything they find on the internet is true, which is really sad. Instead of searching, 20,000 answers they're going to get on Google and finding a wiki on it, they could come to the library, and the librarian could go right to the books and find what they needed, or go to a good website and find what they needed. So appreciate them when they come in. Nurture the relationship. Give me an example of what you might do to nurture a relationship with somebody in your library. Now, there are going to be lots of patrons that come in and out that you never really get to know, but probably most of you have patrons that come in and out that you do know. Chocolate on the desk. I'll be there. Thank you, Lily. But it's true, isn't it? When you do those little touches sometimes, people feel warm and welcomed, and that's important. Jan says Lily took her answer. Abby says remember them, and she likes the chocolate too. But yeah, remember them. Remember their likes. Remember that they mentioned they were going on vacation. Remember that they mentioned that their daughter was getting married, or that their 10-year-old got a trophy for whatever. Again, not to be manipulative, but you know what? When you do that for people and you show that level of respect for them as a human being, it makes your life more pleasant also. Because when they leave and they're happy, you feel good. So it's not a one-way street where you're just trying to dangle things out in front of them to get them to come back to the library. It's that it makes your life more pleasant. My husband had to go get a blood test the other day, and we walked into the lab, and I hate going there because the people at the front desk are just downright mean. And I told him, I said, I wonder why they don't realize at the end of the day they're so tired and depressed because of the way they've treated people all day long. And there wasn't a person in there the entire time we were there that was rude to them. And I'm sure they get that occasionally. But my goodness, don't we all? And to start out the morning, we were there early in the morning, to start out the morning that way, I thought that's really frustrating from a patient standpoint, that they were just mean, rude. And the one down the street isn't a whole lot better, but he did say the person that draws his blood, he absolutely loves. He gets it the first time. There's never any issue, and that's why we go back. It's because of that one person. And I said, do you know his name? Because I would like to write to the lab and tell them what a valuable employee they have and name him by name. He didn't have his name yet, but we're going to get it. And as Genevieve said, their name. People love to hear their name, and that's how you nurture a relationship. If you haven't seen Mrs. Smith for a month and she didn't tell you she was going anywhere, what's the harm in saying, gee, Mrs. Smith, it's been a while since we've seen you. Are you doing okay? Or something like that. Now, you use discernment. You don't want to seem like a stalker, obviously. That's not respect. But respecting them is seeing the value of them and the fact that they haven't been around for a while. And you may be the only person that realizes they haven't been around for a while. Maybe nobody at their grocery store does, or maybe nobody from church called them, or the organization they belong to, but when they go to the library, somebody missed them. That's a form of respect, isn't it? Is noticing them as a human being. Care about what they care about. Now, I have a real problem, and I'm probably going to step on some toes, but I don't like hunting because I'm an animal lover. So if you came to me and said you need to learn about killing and skinning a deer, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to quit my job because I can't do that. But you understand what I'm saying. If they love sports, zero in on their favorite sports team and say, so how are the Mets doing this year? Or whatever it might be. Just to start a conversation, just to go back to number 2 and nurture that relationship when you care about something that they care about. Maybe they're very involved in the community theater, or they're very involved in the museum, or they're very involved with student volunteers, or whatever it might be. When you care about, now that doesn't mean you have to go join whatever they're doing. It just means you show an interest. I love it when people show an interest in my critters because I love my animals. And so I warm up to them automatically when they fuss over my animals. We have home health care coming a couple times a week right now because of my husband's health issues. And our regular nurse, who's on vacation this week, absolutely adores our little handicapped cat. And when she comes in the door, the first thing she does is put everything down and go pet the cat first. Then the dog comes over, so she has to turn from the cat and pet the dog for a couple minutes. Then she comes out and washes her hands real good, and then we sit down and get down to business. But that's a relationship. We feel respected by that. Other people have come and gone in this whole process with his health where they've looked at the dog and just walked by, and it's hard to develop that rapport, isn't it, when you don't show that? So care about what they care about. Like I said, it doesn't mean you have to convert to loving animals or going to the theater or whatever, but just show a special interest in it. Make them feel special. Somebody type into the chat box, if you wouldn't mind, a way that you try to make your patrons feel special. And I think Genevieve already mentioned using their name can make people feel special. Absolutely. And I see several people typing. Personalized reader's advisory. Oh, yes, excellent. Absolutely. Because you zero right in on them, don't you? I can remember once I went into a Panera, and this doesn't happen very often. They seem to have such a tremendous turnover in employees. But when we first moved to Ocala, I was doing some writing. And I love to go to Panera, get a cup of coffee, maybe an orange scone, shh, don't tell anybody, and sit down and write. And I came in one day with all my stuff in my arms, and one of the fellows was on his break, and he was sitting over by the fireplace. They took it out since then, and I don't know if I've been back since they took the fireplace out. But he stood up and he said, Mrs. Bruno, why don't you come over here and sit? I know this is your favorite table. And I said, oh, no, Dwayne, you're working on your paperwork and stuff. Go ahead and sit there. And he goes, no, this is your favorite place to sit. And he gathered up all of his stuff and moved to another table. I kept going back there just because of Dwayne. Even on days I didn't feel really like being at Panera, I'd rather go someplace else. I went back there because Dwayne was so nice to me. Yes, their orange scones are good, aren't they? Abby says, going out of my way to help them. It may be calling the dean to assist us in something I can't do for the student. Absolutely. You went the extra mile then, didn't you, Abby? And that's what respecting people is about. You know, as we're talking, a lot of this can be directly correlated with good customer service. And yet, I've had satisfactory service and didn't really feel respected before either. It was okay. I got what I wanted. Nobody was outright rude, but I didn't really feel respected. So what we're talking about here is the extra that we're doing to make those people feel respected. abide by the platinum rule. We have all heard about the golden rule, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. But years ago, I heard a term called the platinum rule, and I don't know if this person made it up or not, but they said really what you want to try to do is do unto others as they want to be done unto. Not everybody's alike. And I have to realize that because, like I said, my personality is a get it done kind of personality. And so if I interact with everybody based on that, I can come across as kind of quick and abrupt. And I never, ever, ever mean it to be that way. But there's sort of a bottom line for me, and I'm goal oriented and I'm results oriented. And so I have to work on the platinum rule. Maybe I'm talking to somebody that just loves to tell a story. And halfway in, I have to kind of corral my mind to listen carefully and value that person. So I try to treat them as they want to be treated, not necessarily as I would want to be treated, because I don't mind if you get to the point. That's who I am. But I know that other people like that social aspect a little bit more. I had a training friend call once, and she left a long message on my cell phone, and she said at the end, I guess you could just email the answer, but it'd be nice to hear your voice. That's the platinum rule. I picked up the phone and called her. I'm more of an email kind of person. Give her the answer, away we go. But I really felt like she needed that, and she's that kind of a person. So that's what I mean by the platinum rule. I tried to show her respect in what she was needing at that point by actually calling her and talking to her over the phone, when in reality, for me, it would have been just as easy to type a quick answer by email. Number 6 says ask for their input. Input on programming, input on changes you're getting ready to make, input on any number of things that are going around. Let's say you need to move this section away from this section or whatever. Some of your regulars, ask them, what would you think if we put these chairs over by the window? Would that be too much light? What would you think about this? Oh my goodness, folks. Do you think they would feel like part of the family? Do you think they would feel respected if you asked for their input? Can anybody give me an example of a time you've asked your patrons for their input and showed them respect by doing that? What did you ask them for their input on? Sometimes I know that we kind of get in a groove of studying other libraries and what's the library in the next town doing, and we're going to do it exactly that way, instead of saying, is that what's going to work for our patrons? That's what we're talking about, isn't it? We're not here to compete with the other library in the sense that we have to do everything exactly like they're doing it. We want to be the library of choice, of course. So I guess that is a competition. But what we want to do is be the library of choice because we're keyed in so much to what our patrons want, and we respect their opinions so much that we automatically look to them for guidance as to what we're going to do. I see some people typing, so I'm going to wait just a second. I want to see if you've had examples of asking for their input, what they liked about the library, and input for future programs. You know, that's a great point, Jan. Sometimes for my evaluations when I'm face-to-face, I will give people a card. Some of you who have been in my face-to-face programs know this. And I ask you to rate my program on a score of 1 to 10. 1 is the worst workshop you've ever been to. 10 means you really get something out of it you can go apply right away. And I let everybody write their numbers down. And then I ask them, if it's a 10, what was it that you got that helped you the most so that I never take that piece out of this program? Because that will help me as I tweak programs all the time. And if it wasn't a 10, what would have made it a 10? Last week I got an answer from somebody, I got an 8, and the answer for what would have made it a 10 was donuts. So I take all of that with a grain of salt, but I get some really good input that way too. So why not ask them for input? And I hope I'm showing them respect by doing that, because they're the people I'm trying to reach and trying to make a difference for. So if I just go off and go to other training sessions and say, oh, this is what they do, so I'm going to do this, X, Y, Z, very rigid, da-da-da-da, that's not who I am, and I don't feel I'll be respecting the people in my programs. Abby says, when I owned a restaurant, we were going to take an item off the menu because it got too expensive. I asked our regulars if they would like us to keep the item but make the serving slightly smaller. They all wanted to do that and continued to order that item. That's great, because people get really frustrated when you take their favorite off the menu, don't they? I get really frustrated when I go to Panera and they don't have a scone at 10 o'clock in the morning. I haven't had one of those for a long time. I may have to stop today after lunch and do that. You can tell that's on my mind, but that's a great way to do that. You get input. Marcia said suggestions for collection development. One patron loves Christian fiction. Pick her brain on that genre, for example. Absolutely. Who are your favorite authors? Are there any up-and-coming authors that you would like to get some books on and see how they're received? Because when you're just sitting with a catalog, you may know what everybody else is ordering. You may know what's the most popular or the best seller, so to speak, from a library standpoint, but it doesn't really mean that's what's going to apply to you. If you have a metropolitan library and you have a small rural library, collection development is going to be considerably different. And I would think it would be much easier if you reach out to people and ask them what they're looking for, right? That's showing respect for them. It says, without saying so, we know you're the reason we're here. And we want to make sure that we're giving you a reason to keep us here. That's exactly what that's saying. Number 7 says respect their time. I have to tell you this quick little story. On December 26th, we ordered an electronic La-Z-Boy chair. My husband rests a lot because of his health issues, and it was just nice to have all of those adjustments. And it has a 3-year warranty on the electronics, so we thought, okay, in 3 years, if it's not any good anymore, we've got a nice chair. Well, we got it February 13th, so we waited a while, December 26th to February 13th. It was expensive. February 18th, it quit working. I was very frustrated. He was very frustrated. I called up and I said, can you just come and pick up the chair and we'll come and get a regular chair? We don't want the electronics anymore. Obviously, that's going to be a problem. It's 5 days old. The first words out of her mouth were, you had 3 days to return it. First words out of her mouth. And I said, but it took 5 for it to break. She automatically escalated the discussion to me being angrier by the first words out of her mouth. And we finally got to the end. She said, well, you don't even have 3 days to return it because it's special order. You could have paid a 30% restocking fee if it was stocked, but it's special order, so you can't even return it. That was the whole gist of her conversation. So I finally said, then fine, send somebody out to look at it. And she said, well, they can come out Friday between 8 and 1. And I said, I've got a webinar Friday morning, and I think that actually was one of Luli's webinars. And I said, I have an appointment at 12:30. Can they come out after 1? And she said, no, they can't. I know they can't come out after 1. And I said, even though the chair is defective, you can't work around my schedule just a little bit? No, they can't come out after 1. We can't schedule them after 1. She was so rude. I said, fine. I canceled my other appointment. I sat and I waited until 1:06 when the truck finally pulled up. My appointment was 3 minutes away. I could have made my appointment. But because she said we can't schedule it for after 1, it'll be sometime between 11. I finally did get her to narrow it down between 11:30 and 1. Now, people say, did you get the chair back? Yes, we got it back about a week later. They'd fixed it. They couldn't fix it at home, so they took it with them and they fixed it. But here's what frustrates me about that. There was no respect for my time. There was no respect for the fact that I had to then lug the other old chair back into the bedroom by myself because my husband can't do it. He's on a feeding tube. So I'm in there in the other room taking the other chair apart and trying to roll it into the bedroom again so he has a chair to sit in because we had no idea how long it would take. The time involved in that was frustrating for me. And I felt 0, maybe minus 25% respect from that whole situation. So respect their time. Catherine said, the educational institution I used to work for had a whiteboard for students and others, comments and suggestions for improvements. There you go. Just anonymous. They just write them up there. You take it with a grain of salt. Like I said, when people tell me donuts or the chairs were too hard or it was too cold or things like that, those are things I don't have any control over. Donuts I probably could bring, but I bring candy instead. But yes, I take those comments and suggestions because it shows respect, doesn't it, Catherine? That's what we're talking about. And yet you're not necessarily calling them together for a 3-hour meeting and taking up their time either because you respect their time in doing that. Number 8 says, understand and value the diversity in your library. Well, that's a given, but if some of you have been here since the first, or you were able to attend the very first session in the Diversity Discovery Institute, it was about D is for differences. And I've listed on your handouts some of the differences, and that's not all of them, but there are what, probably a couple dozen there. But I want you to think about this. We don't often think about, we know that people grow up in different geographical areas. People are different genders, people are different ages and ethnicities and races and so forth. But some of the things that are more subtle, picture, if you will, like Sophia used to say on Golden Girls, maybe 6 30-year-old males that all went to school together in a small Midwestern town. Okay? So they're all pretty similar. They all grew up there. They were all born and raised there. It's a small town. It's in the Midwest. None of them choose to go to college because it's a farming community. They're going to farm. They all get married about the same time within a year or two. They all have 2 kids. They're all pretty much the same height and the same weight. You can take those 6 people and you still have a ton of diversity, don't you? You have diversity in maybe whether they're an introvert or an extrovert. You have diversity in their upbringing, how their parents raised them, even though they came from the same background. Abby says body types and our attitudes about that. Absolutely. That's part of the diversity, isn't it? I was reading the other day, somebody said, she said, just because I'm skinny, you assume I'm anorexic. And that was offensive to that particular person. Think about identical twins. We mentioned that the last session. They're identical, right? No. One of them could be the introvert, one of them the extrovert, one of them could have a higher IQ. One of them could be a very sensitive feeling person and the other more aloof and cool. Happens all the time. So the diversity is there and it's huge. There's probably, I don't know, a dozen or more things that we never really know about a person if we're looking at 2 people that seem identical. So understand and value that diversity in your library. As we see there, lots of different things, and I didn't even list them all. There are so many, as Abby said, there's body types, the attitude we have about body types, the attitude we have whether you wear glasses or not. Some of you are of an age like I am where we remember when contacts first came out and everybody rushed to get contacts because they didn't want to be the one wearing glasses. And I wear my glasses. I did have contacts for a while, but they were a pain. And I have real dry eyes. So I thought, you know what? And people have asked me before when I go looking for my glasses, can't you just wear contacts? No, glasses are easier for me. So just something as simple as whether you wear glasses or not can influence people. And certainly as you're younger, right? Because in school, kids can be very cruel about those kinds of things. They don't understand the diversity either. And Lily said, I still don't want you to see me with glasses on, but the cheaters are cool. Yeah, there you go. They've got kind of cute ones out there now. So it can be any number of things that we don't consciously think of when we're thinking of diversity. And when we don't consciously think of them, we can easily disrespect that aspect of that person without even realizing we're doing that. So we just need to be careful about that. Number 9 at the top of page 2 says eliminate, to show respect for your patrons, eliminate any obstacles in dealing with you, and those obstacles are different based on the diversity of the people coming in your library. There are often times when somebody will come in and they don't know their way around your library or they don't really understand your process, and somebody will say, that's not my job. Well, that's okay if you say, let me go find the expert that will take care of that for you. That's showing respect for that person. But saying not my job is not appropriate to show respect for people. Jargon. I was on a forum the other day, in a library discussion forum. I lurk on some of those just to kind of get a feel for what people are discussing. And somebody was talking about, somebody asked me about how to ask a reference question, and they were standing at the CERC desk. And somebody else came back and said, did they know the difference? Probably not. CERC and Ref Desk, most people don't know the difference if they're just coming into your library to use the library. Do you have it obviously named? Does it need to be named? Do they need to be separated? I don't know. But don't assume that those people are going to understand your jargon, because that shows disrespect. I sometimes talk to people about the program titles they use. When I was doing the Project Compass project for the state of Florida, it was a nationwide program about 3 years ago, and I was fortunate enough to be chosen to help the state of Florida in libraries to help them help the unemployed. When I went for Train the Trainer in North Carolina, we talked about different things that we were going to be doing, and somebody said, we need to have a financial literacy class. And I kind of held my tongue for a while because I was sort of the new kid on the block. But I finally said, you might want to consider calling that something different because that could put people off, couldn't it? Because financial literacy, if you have to come to that class, indicates that you're illiterate in that area. And it may feel disrespectful to somebody. So I was in one of the Project Compass workshops, and we were talking about being really careful if you're trying to help, especially people that are unemployed because their self-esteem has already been shot. In a lot of cases, they've been fired or laid off or whatever. And if you make them feel less than, that's not showing respect for them. So we were talking about the financial literacy title, and one lady said, I could call mine How to Cut Your Budget by 30% Overnight. And I looked at her and she said, I had to do that when my husband was laid off. I said, go ahead and do a workshop called just that, or call it 10% if you don't feel comfortable. And she went, I think I could put that together. I said, I think you could too. You've done it. Yeah, life skills is good. And even then, life skills, you think, okay, does that mean I don't know how to do these things? Do you see how that can make a difference in how people feel respected or disrespected? Here's what I need you to understand, and I hope you will take this in the vein that I'm saying it. That is that people can be intimidated by your library, can't they? They can be intimidated by you. You all are very knowledgeable, intellectual kinds of people hanging out in this library. That's how they perceive that, and they're right. And so they're already a bit intimidated when they walk into the library. So anything we use as a title or how we're promoting something, we need to step back and look at that from somebody's perspective that doesn't come to the library that often. Is it going to resonate with them? Is it going to make them feel good about themselves? So when you're thinking about respecting people when you're doing programming and so forth, be very careful about how you title programs. And Genevieve says she sees that with freshman students. They're lost. And people start throwing this stuff out at them, don't they, Genevieve? A lot of people do. And they don't know what the heck you're talking about. Or maybe their counselor has said, go do this, go do this. They don't even know what building they're supposed to go to. And so that's a sign of disrespect in a sense, because now you've made them feel stupid. Very easy to do. Older students too, absolutely, Abby. I was just thinking when I went into my MBA program up at UF, which some of you know was just a couple years ago. It's been 2 years almost since I graduated, and it was a 16-month program. So it's been about 3 years ago. I went into the program, and my first class was something to do with corporate finance. I can't remember the title of the class. But we went into the class, and the professor started in the middle of the textbook with all of these jargon words that you use in corporate finance. I came home after the first weekend in tears, and my husband said, what's wrong? And I said, I don't think I can do this. I had had a class in corporate finance in my undergrad, and it talked about some of those things, but we were smack dab in the middle of it, supposed to do all of the numbers and all that kind of stuff. And he made me feel stupid. I never felt any respect from him. There were several people up there I didn't feel any respect from, and I've talked to other people at other colleges that feel the same way. It's easy to get kind of an attitude in that life and in that world, and those freshmen coming in, as Genevieve said, they're lost. They feel intimidated, whether they're older or whether they're 22 or 18 or 26 or whatever it might be, and I was a lot older than that. I was double the age of the average person in my class, and I did not feel respected by a lot of those people. Now, there were a couple of older professors I felt very respected by, maybe because they've gone through something similar, I don't know. But we need to be very careful about our jargon. Difficult phone menus. I called someplace yesterday and I had to hang up after about 2 minutes. Now, that's not a lot of time, but nowadays that's a lot of time, isn't it? Because the phone menu kept routing me around and I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go. Am I supposed to go to billing or payments? Wouldn't that be the same thing? I really didn't know. And the first time I got to the wrong place. Then the second time I got to the sales department. I said, I don't want sales. I need to talk to somebody about my bill. It was very frustrating. Do you hear that? Not honoring my time, not respecting my time. And on the website sometimes, people will put things kind of obscure because they really don't want people to go to that section. That's disrespectful of people's time, and you're not valuing them when you're doing that to them. So be careful of your phone menus. Have somebody call your library after hours and just listen to the message and see if it's respectful, or is it sort of, I know this isn't what you would say, you can't come in now, we're closed. But that's kind of the tone that comes across sometimes, isn't it? I had somebody talking to me the other day, and she's a branch library director. And she said, I'm really struggling because my people will chase people out at a quarter till when it's time to close. And she said, I'm not there sometimes. I am sometimes, but I'm not always. And I hear about that, and I've talked to them about it. But they say, well, we've got to get them out by closing time. And she'll say, if they're in the middle of something, it's going to take a couple minutes. It's okay. It's disrespectful, isn't it? Now, if people abuse it, then certainly you know who abuses it. But she looked at me and she said, I know some of these people. They don't abuse it. They might be finishing up their last copy and somebody's trying to chase them away. It's disrespectful. So be very careful of your phone menus. Have somebody call during the day when the menu is actually in place and see if they can work through your phone menu easily. Are the departments clear? If you're in a large system and you have a menu that says, if you need the circulation department, press 1. If you need the reference desk part 2, press 2. Do they know which one they're going to need? Should you say, if you're looking for a particular book, you need circulation, press 1, or something like that? So phone menus can show respect for them. Inaccessible staff. You notice I didn't say you were short-staffed. I said people are inaccessible. This happens more often than I would like. I go to a lot of libraries as I travel around in Florida and out of state. And most of the time, people are very warm and welcoming. And sometimes I get into the library where the entire atmosphere feels inaccessible, as if I'm the interruption, as if I'm the one that's causing them a problem. When if I were a patron, which I'm usually not when I'm in those libraries, once in a while I'm able to get there in time to go just visit the library. But if I'm a patron and I get that feeling, and I'm sure patrons do, I'm not going to feel respected. I was in a retail operation once looking for a Garmin system for my husband's car, GPS system, and we already had it picked out. We'd looked at the ones on display. We had the one picked out. We had a couple questions to ask comparison-wise. 3 employees were standing about 3 feet away from us. All of them looked at us, turned around, went their separate ways. I watched. They did not have a customer. I turned around and went my separate way. Don't go there anymore. Lost business. Yes, people aren't handing you their hard-earned money, but they are in the sense that they support your library. So make sure staff is accessible and makes them feel welcome when they do find them, the staff member. Don't pass the buck. It doesn't show respect for somebody when you say, oh, they always do this, meaning somebody else in your library. There's a disconnect there, isn't there? And when you do that, that person that you're helping feels a little bit uncomfortable because now they are the enemy, and they might be the people at the reference desk or the circulation desk or your supervisor or whomever it might be. Don't pass the buck. You're all on the same team and you're all there to help your patron. It shows respect for them. It's disrespectful in my mind for employees or supervisors or whoever it might be to show any kind of friction or tension among their group in front of a customer. It disrespects me. I don't want to see that. Most of them would tell you, I get enough of that on my own. I don't need to see it at the library. So don't pass the buck. Give them options when you can. I think it shows that somebody really respects me as a patron, as a human being, when they say, here's what we can do, and they give me at least 2 options. Now, neither one of them may be exactly what I was hoping for, but if you've given me options, you've also given me a bit of control, haven't you? And most people want to have some control over whatever transaction they are trying to process here. So if you can give them some options when you can, then they feel like they have control and they feel respected by that you haven't ripped control out of their hands. You'll have to do this and you'll have to do that. No, they really don't. You'll have to come back tomorrow to get your card. No, I really don't. I'll go home, order it on Amazon, or I'll go down to Barnes & Noble, or I'll go to the library 2 miles away. So give them options. And what happens a lot of times is we decide in our minds that there are no options, and if we look hard enough, there are options. So be real careful when you don't think there are any options, and step back from that and say, is there something else we could do that would be helpful here as an option? Because that shows that you value them enough and respect them enough as a patron that you're going to try to help accomplish what they came in to get accomplished. I hate it when PowerPoint decides to renumber my slides and I don't catch it, so I apologize for this. Make your website easy to use is actually number 12 on your page 2. Be careful of your pathways. What are they titled? How deep do they go? Do I have to go 8 pages in to find something? I actually am attending church now online with my church from Ohio. I just can't find anybody that I like better than Pastor Stan. And I'm trying to find out who I can get to without asking him directly, because it's a church of about 3,000 people and he's very sweet and he emails me occasionally to check on my husband and all that stuff, but I don't want to bother him with website issues. But I have to click 6 times to get to the live online service on Sunday morning. And it's not a big deal, but from Sunday to Sunday, you have to retrain me. I can't figure out where I'm supposed to go. It's very hard to find the live online button. And I'm thinking to myself, let's just have a tab there that says live online Sunday mornings, and that's where I click and I'm right in the portal. So it's one of those things that at some point I'll figure out who I need to contact, and that might be helpful for them to develop more of their online audience. So what are your pathways? Again, consider a mystery shopper of sorts. Maybe a friend of yours who really isn't interested in the library, doesn't want to come in, doesn't know that much about it. Have them go to your website. Ask them, do a little scavenger hunt. Ask them to find certain things. When I was getting ready to register for my master's degree, I had one class that they thought I hadn't taken. It actually ended up I had, but I registered at St. Leo to take that one class. And one of the first things they required was you had to do a scavenger hunt to find how to do an assignment, how to do research in the library, all these kinds of things. It was fabulous. So do that for your website. Abby says you might be doing him a big service by asking, because I knew you'd do it in a very nice way. Oh, thank you, Abby. That's very kind. Well, I'm going to figure it out one of these days, but I just haven't figured out who to get to yet. So have somebody look at your website and say, here's what I want you to find. Now, not just obviously the icons named exactly what you have them named already, but go to our website and try to find how to contact us. Go to our website and find directions. Go to our website and find our summer reading program. Whatever it might be, actually have a 5 or 6 little page scavenger hunt. Give them a candy bar for it or whatever. But that's a way to make sure you're respecting the person who's looking at your website and not just doing it at your convenience or the way that works out easiest for you. And again, be careful of those titles, the links, etc. Some people don't even know what an online database is. So if you have a link for online databases, what does that mean to me as a patron? Or am I feeling stupid because I don't know what that means to me as a patron? So be very careful about what your website actually says. And ask somebody who's kind of disconnected from your library to take a look at it and say, is it easy to understand? Do you feel valued when you go there? Do you feel like we're not trying to use jargon that's over your head or anything? Because that's how you show respect for people, is putting it in their terms in ways that they speak. Again, I go back to the financial literacy thing. If you have a link there that says financial literacy, I don't know that that would be as warm and welcoming as budgeting tips or something that simple. I think it's Orlando. The main library in Orlando has the right service at the right time button. That makes sense to me for people who need help paying their electric bill or help with daycare or help with social services or whatever, right service at the right time. That's because you can't get real wordy on those icons, and that seems to be helpful. 13 says, talk to the staff members who deal with patrons most often. What are they hearing? What issues need to be addressed for the patrons to feel respected? Just make it a regular part of your day or your month or whatever it might be to just talk to other people and say, what are you hearing the patrons get frustrated about? Because if they feel frustrated, they don't feel respected. So talk to the staff members who deal with the patrons most often. Some of you do deal with patrons often, and some of you might be more in the background. And then listen. I have interacted with groups before where we've set up ways for them to survey staff people, to survey the people that patronize them, and then lo and behold, they get the survey results back and they go, oh, and they put them in a desk drawer somewhere. They don't listen at all. They see it, but they don't actually listen to what's going on. So yes, there are going to be some suggestions that you cannot do. Understandable. But you'll never know if you don't ask what they're really looking for. Like somebody was saying, maybe a different genre that you're not that familiar with, and you can ask somebody to give you input about what the patrons are looking for that you may not have. Don't drop the ball. It's very disrespectful that if you look at a young person and you are, let's just say, stereotyping them because it's a young person and they have something to ask for, and you say, yeah, we'll get that, then you're not respecting that diversity, are you, if you don't follow through on that because they're young? They're young. They're not going to get that upset if I wait 3 more days or whatever. That's disrespectful. So don't drop the ball. Fulfill your promises in a timely manner. 16 says, admit mistakes and fix them. What I think happens sometimes with diversity is that because somebody is different than us, if they suggest fixing something, we don't respect their opinion necessarily. It's sort of that old, oh yeah, how long have you been in the library field kind of a thought. When you go to the medical doctor, the old joke was if you tried to suggest something to them, they ask what degree, what university you got your medical degree from. That used to be the standing joke, that you couldn't question, quote, authority. Don't make your patrons feel that way. If they do address something and you're dismissive of them, that's not showing respect for them. Again, it might be young people, or in this case, it might very much be older people that are asking for something, because as society ages, the older people become on the fringes, and I can testify to that. I don't feel like I'm an older person, but the nurse that was in yesterday said, I have a friend who's, and she named my age. I have a much older friend. People would be surprised that we're friends. She's so much older than I am. And she named my age, and I looked at her and I said, be careful. That's the age I'm going to be in 6 weeks. So if I suggest to you that there might be something in your library that's broken, and I'm not saying physically broken, but a system that really doesn't work very well, or it's a mistake because it's not friendly to the user, it's not user friendly, don't judge me because I'm too young or too old, or I don't know anything about it, or I'm not in the library field, or I don't understand what we're trying to do here, or anything else. Respect my opinion. Listen to my opinion. If you determine that it's not a mistake, fine, then there's no need to fix it. Number 17 says, work to believe. I saw this term somewhere a while back, and I wish I could credit where I saw it. I'm sure other people have used it. But the meaning is, instead of instantly deciding that this person doesn't know what they're talking about because they're different than you, work to believe them. Show trust, not disdain. And again, we go back to even an introvert-extrovert thing. Because I have a training friend who has admitted that when she first met me, because she is high extrovert, and I'm fairly high introvert, that she just didn't even know what I was talking about, basically. She didn't believe, really, any of my responses in the training venues that we were in because she did not perceive them that way. And she said, now I get what you were saying. But as we all tend to do, she saw it only from her perspective, and I do the same thing. And instead of working to believe, for instance, if somebody comes in and it's a teenager, and the teenager says, this is what happened to the book, try hard to believe them instead of automatically thinking it's a teenager. That's not what happened to that book. And sometimes just doing that and changing your own attitude shows a measure of respect that might not have been there before. You'll take care of it no matter what, but it may seem more respectful to that person if you work hard to believe. Because what's the difference? If you're going to take care of it anyway, and you show disdain, you've showed disrespect. If you're going to take care of it anyway, why not just assume that they're telling you the truth? Now, if it's an issue where you have to charge a fine, if it's not true or whatever, that's a whole different thing. But work to believe what they're saying to you. Don't debate your customer. Nobody wins. Nobody wins. You may feel better in the moment, as the chairperson did when she argued with me for 5 minutes, but she didn't win, I assure you. Because there are other pieces of furniture that I would like to get in the next year or two, and I will not step foot back in that store. People have asked me about this chair, and I'm not one to go out shouting on the streets, but when people ask me, I tell them, don't go there. Go someplace else. So don't debate your customer. It may make you feel good. And here's what happens sometimes, I think. We are maybe a little bit frayed in our nerves because of being short-staffed, or because we just had a meeting and we got extra responsibilities, or we just don't feel good today, or we're not interacting real well with our own coworkers right at the moment. And so when the customer comes in, guess who gets the pleasure of that response? It's the customer or the patron. And so, you know what? I can debate them because I have control here. And I'll win because I make the rules. Or the library made the rules and I decide whether I'm going to stick to them or not. Ha ha ha. And you have this little, it's a subconscious thing, folks. I know nobody in this room would do this intentionally, but it's human for us when we're frustrated and we don't have a lot of control over something. When we find something we have control over, which is whether or not this patron gets their way, we will debate them and feel like, there you go. Sort of like the people that came to a program a couple years ago and the person said, we've got a lady that puts 200 books on hold, and I might have mentioned this to you. And I said, and whose fault is that? Well, we've told her you shouldn't put so many books on hold. And I said, and whose fault is that? I had to say it 4 times before they realized if she's not supposed to have 200 books on hold, there should be a reason and a policy in place. Don't make her feel bad about that, because she can go to another library and put books on hold. So don't debate the customer. You just don't win. You may win in the moment. Nothing wrong with stating facts. Nothing wrong with letting them know what you can or cannot do. Hopefully what you can do instead of what you can't do. But when you debate them, is that really the best thing you can do? As Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you? It usually doesn't, does it? Set an example even behind closed doors. Show respect for people. If it's an area you struggle with certain groups of people, the older I get, the more disconnected I am from really young people, and I have to work at that a bit. So I've tried to, when people will say something, I try to defend that or see the other side of it or have empathy with that group, because we were all young once. On the other hand, I would hope that younger people, maybe younger staff people, would have empathy with my group, because they're going to get to be my age. And it's going to happen real fast. And older. I am not elderly. Some people classify me as elderly, but I'm not. So set an example even behind closed doors. Show that respect for the young people, the introverts, the different gender, the different generation, the different culture, the different race, the different educational levels, the different social status, whatever it is. Set the example even behind closed doors, because what that does for you is it develops a habit, doesn't it? So that you aren't saying one thing in front of people and then going behind closed doors and saying, can you believe that every time this kind of a person comes in, this is what happens? Well, you've just set the tone then for the next time that person or somebody like them comes in. And that's not respecting them. Mind your manners. What other ways can you mind your manners in your library to show respect besides please, thank you, and a smile, which I think are givens but are so far removed from our current society? What can you do to mind your manners in your library in addition to please, thank you, and smiling? Bite your tongue. Yes, sometimes that's what it takes to mind your manners, isn't it, Lily? You know what? I am not in la la land. I know that as human beings, people get on our nerves, and sometimes certain people get on every nerve. So sometimes you do need to bite your tongue to be able to mind your manners. That's part of it. Match their language level or style. Absolutely. If I speak quickly, I don't want you to drag this out. If I speak slowly, I want you to listen, pay attention to me, make eye contact, all of the above, so that you're matching my style. Dawn says, pretty simple, right, Dawn? Acknowledge them. And how many times do you go into places where you're not acknowledged? I've gone into several libraries as I do my work around the country where I'm not acknowledged, where I have to keep asking, should I set the tables up myself, or is there somebody that can help me? Is there somebody that's going to help me with IT? Which room should I use? All those kinds of things. I'm not acknowledged. I'm an intrusion for them because I'm the speaker. I'm what made them set up tables and chairs in the meeting room today. And apparently that's a bad thing. So acknowledging me with a smile sets the whole tone for me for the day. And Louis says, bite your tongue respectfully, of course. And Linda says, offer a greeting. That's showing respect for people. You respect the value of that human being because you acknowledge they are a human being when they walk in your doors. That's manners, isn't it? And so often we go into places nowadays, they look up, they see us, they look back down and go about their business. Now, I don't think you need to go to the extreme, what is it, IHOP, morning, 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 where you hear 16 people chant that when you walk in. That gets a little overdone. But you can certainly smile and offer them a greeting and say, let me know how I can help you today, or something along those lines. It's showing respect for the other person. 21 says, create an atmosphere that makes your patrons want to return. If they feel disrespected, they may have to return because you've got something they need, but that's not the kind of patronage you want, is it? You want them to want to come to their library. I love it when I go to a library and I have to get in early in the morning before the doors open and there's already a line waiting to get into the library. There's something drawing them to that library. And the times I've been at libraries where they felt cold and aloof and it didn't feel respectful, I didn't see people standing in line. Yes, people came in during the day, but I love to see that line at the library. As Linda said, greet them as soon as they walk in. Acknowledge them as they're there. If they're there for a half an hour, 45 minutes, and they're kind of wandering around, acknowledge them. Remember names. We've mentioned this before. It's very, very important. I don't want you to try to memorize everybody's names. I did a program as an audition with a trainer from Dun & Bradstreet when I first started doing training a long time ago, and we were in New York City, and she told me that morning I was going to do 45 minutes of her workshop as an audition. And she said, now I always try to remember everybody's names as they come in the room and call them by name. So she introduced herself and shook hands with everybody at the back door, and 3 times before lunch she had miscalled somebody's names. And I thought, okay, I think we would be better to not try to memorize them. So what I do is I take 5x7 index cards at a face-to-face workshop, have you fold it in half, put your name on it, then I can call you by name. And by the end of the program, I know your name. But I won't know it just with you coming in the back door, and then that shows disrespect if I call you by the wrong name. So don't try to remember everybody's names, but certainly if you know you have a handful of patrons that are there frequently, it's good to remember their names and use them. Ask for their feedback. That's different than input, isn't it? Input is coming in before you plan something. So what kind of programming would you like? What additional books would you like by this author? Are there other authors in this genre you would like, etc.? Feedback is, okay, we just did this new program on genealogy, and asking the 12 people that were there, what could we do differently? What could we do better? What could we leave out? What should we add for next time? That's getting feedback. We've already done something. Now we want to know how that worked for them. That shows respect. I love when people say, did that work for you? Now I will tell you that getting an automatic computer-generated question from a company that I've spent money with, or asking me to go do their review at their website, that doesn't really appeal to me that much. If it's more personalized, which we're able to do in the library, that's a lot more respectful, isn't it? It's great that they gather statistics, but I don't want to be just a statistic. That's not showing respect. It's okay. I don't find that offensive or anything, but it doesn't really make me feel respected as a customer like somebody has told them that it will. Oh, if you ask for their opinion, well, not if you're asking for 1,000 people at the same time and you have no idea who I am. That's not really respectful. It's okay. You're gathering statistics. I get it. But in a library situation, when you get their feedback, that makes them feel important. Not in a dishonest way, not in a deceptive way, not in a manipulative way, but to let them know you really do value them as a person and value their opinion. Cross-train other people, as silly as this sounds, I think it's so disrespectful for me to go to a place and they say the person that handles that is gone today. Really, what if they never show up again? Who is going to handle that? So it just comes across as kind of disrespectful to people who need help with something and the person that handles that. It doesn't mean you have to cross-train everybody for every job, but there shouldn't be just one person that handles a certain thing. There's probably going to be one person that's more knowledgeable in an area than other people, but there should be people that are at least familiar so that if you're gone or something happens in an emergency situation, your patrons are not left hanging and feeling disrespected because wasn't my issue important enough for somebody to understand it and try to work with it. Just ask yourself, if they're almost finished with the library and they're coming up to check out, what else can I do to make them feel valued? Can I smile at them? Can I acknowledge them? Can I ask them about the last book they read? Can I ask them if they have any suggestions for somebody else who likes that genre? Wouldn't that be cool? Somebody brings up a book by Ken Follett and you say, I know that you've probably read every book in his repertoire. Can you suggest any other authors that are similar to them? I have a patron who likes his work. They're only about halfway through what he's written, but I'd like to be able to suggest something to them. People like that. They feel respected by that. Diane says, when I work in public services area, I do say that I work in another area, but I'll try to help them. And if I can, I walk them over to somebody who can continue my effort. That's exactly what we're talking about, isn't it, Diane? We're showing respect for them. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, I'm new, or I don't work in this area very often. And I've heard that before. And people just look at you. And you're thinking, well, okay, where am I supposed to go? Or they say you'll have to come back tomorrow when that person's back. What? No. That's not respectful. As Diane says, nothing wrong with explaining to them because Linda Bruno is going to look inept if you ask me to do something I'm not trained thoroughly with. But I have no problem saying, I'm filling in for somebody today and I know the general idea of it, but I don't know the depth of it, but I know who does and I'll get you to the expert. That makes people feel valued, doesn't it? Yeah, Diane, I like that. We will learn together. Exactly. And you do learn, don't you, Diane? Especially if you're warm and friendly about it. That person might even share knowledge they have that you didn't have. Maybe you don't work with the copier that much, but you're going to help them and you'll learn together. And they say, well, the last time I was here, they pressed this button. Oh, okay. I didn't realize we had to press that button first. Nothing wrong with that. It's respectful to show you don't know everything, isn't it? You're respecting the other person when you show that. Abby says sometimes we consult each other about APA format to make sure we're giving the student correct information. Absolutely, it could make a difference in their grade. And it changes, Abby, which is what flustered me when I was going to school. Depending on what edition you had, it would actually change from year to year. That was very frustrating for me as a student. I had one of my papers downgraded, not by a lot, but by a point or two, and I went back and looked at the guide that I had been given by the school, and that's what it said, and I addressed it with the teacher. I said, I know this is only a point or two, but here's what I have, and oh, no, that's changed. Here's the website. I felt very disrespected, because don't give me one piece of information, and it's wrong, and then downgrade me for it. So it's showing respect for them to make sure you give them accurate information, isn't it? Be approachable. Like I mentioned earlier, you're intimidating to people. And I know you're all thinking, me? I'm intimidating? You can be. Not that you are with everybody, but you can be just because of your environment. So just be approachable. As many of you have talked about already, you smile at people, you greet them when they come in, you kind of maintain eye contact throughout their visit if you can occasionally, not to stalk them and make them feel like you're following them around, but just to let them know that you are approachable. When I walked into the library a couple years ago, one of the libraries that I was out of town working with, I said, they told me to come to a certain door, and I did, and I said, I'm here for the workshop today. And she looked at me very blankly, and I said, do you know where I should go? I don't have a clue. She said, you'll have to go through those doors. And I said, will there be somebody out there to help me? And she said, I don't know. So I walked through the doors and I wandered around the library before it was open, trying to find a human being. I finally saw somebody in a room setting up some food. Thought, that's a good match. I walked in and I said, is this where the workshop's going to be today? Now, I usually get somebody's contact name, but in that case, I did not have anybody I was supposed to contact. Just come to the back door. Somebody will help you. And nobody did. So I didn't feel like anybody was approachable. And I would not, if I lived 2 minutes away from that library, probably would not have patronized that library because of that feeling I got. I did not feel respected. Be aware of looks of confusion. And be kind to them and say, you know, I know everything we have here can be overwhelming. What can I help you find? Or is there something that's confusing? Because sometimes we look at it from our library's perspective and we don't always see it from your eyes. It's worth asking them, isn't it? Be aware of those looks of confusion and touch base with them, not to make them feel bad or anything else, but to just make sure you've answered all of their questions and they feel comfortable getting or doing whatever they need to do in the library. Here's another one we sometimes miss. Acknowledge those people waiting in line. I see that there are 4 people ahead of me, but it would be nice if you just kind of tilted your head, said, we'll be right with you, to the other 3 people behind, just so we know you're aware that there's a line there. I'm sorry, it's lunchtime. We get a little backed up occasionally when it's lunchtime or whatever it might be. Acknowledge those people waiting in line. They don't want to feel as if they're being ignored. Yes, Diane, some banks are very good about that. Absolutely. Some retail stores are very good about it. Some retail stores will have 7 people standing in line, and the person checking out looks at one person at a time, next person, and really it would take, what, a half a second to just gaze at the rest of the line and say, we'll be right with you. Thanks for your patience. Absolutely. When they come up to the line, or if they've been waiting a while, thank you for your patience. We really appreciate it. Not sure why it's so busy today, but we sure appreciate your patience. Make it very conversational. It doesn't have to be stiff or rigid or rule sounding. It needs to just sound like you value and respect them as a patron and you want them to come back. And this is not your normal mode of operation. Now, if it is your normal mode of operation, maybe you need to look at the schedule. If every Monday from 11:30 to 1 you are just slammed with people, and you only have one person on the desk checking people out, then maybe you could adjust the schedule a little bit so that that doesn't happen. Again, that's that, even though it may not be verbal feedback, it would be visual feedback, wouldn't it? You would understand that, gosh, these people really don't want to wait in line, and we go back to valuing their time again. We think because they're in the library they have nothing else to do this morning or this afternoon or this Saturday, but people still value their time, don't they? Exactly, Anthony. That's why desk statistics are so important, to know when your busy times are, and they can change, can't they, Anthony? Of course they change in areas where you have snowbirds. They change in areas where you're in an academic situation. But sometimes they change just in what I'll call a regular public library. For some reason there's a shift. And if you're not paying attention, it becomes an annoyance for those people who are waiting in line, and the second time they have to do it, or the third time or whatever, they decide they don't want to do this anymore. And remember, we go way back to earlier in this program when I talked about valuing their time. That's a sign of respect. It's just amazing to me how many places figure if you eventually get taken care of, that's all that matters. Well, no, my time is extremely valuable to me. If you show me that you're trying to value my time, then I will appreciate that and I will return. And that's what we're looking for, isn't it? So make sure you're valuing people's time and not just assuming that they have all the time in the world. That's very frustrating to me. That happens a lot in this home health care situation that my husband's in. They assume because we live in a retirement community and because of his age that we both are sitting here twiddling our thumbs before they come, some of them. And they will tell you between 12 and 2, and invariably they get here at 2 or 2:15. Well, I've just spent 2 hours not really wanting to start anything because they might be here when they know when they're going to be here. They don't need a 2-hour window. And he still teaches 4 college classes online. So he's got stuff he's doing. And so sometimes they come at a time when they really weren't supposed to be here yet, or they're late, and he's in the middle of grading a paper and he'll finish because they didn't live up to their expectation. They're not valuing his time. You're retired, you live in a retirement community, you're old, basically is what they're saying. We don't have to be there on time because you have nothing else to do. So never take that attitude with people. Abby says retired people are sometimes busier than those of us still working. Yes. And we may look at it as, quote, busy work that they're doing, or they're just filling time. But if they have a schedule and they want to be at play practice at 5 o'clock, and they want to go out to dinner with friends at 6 o'clock, and they want to go to the pool at 3 o'clock, then that's their schedule and we should value their time. Do I think that's as important as my job? No, because I love my job and I love what I do. But I hope I respect that. I can remember a program where many years ago, and it was a really good lesson for me. Some of you who go to face-to-face programs know that I don't usually go out for lunch. I will bring my lunch or a snack or something because I don't want to leave the premises. The person hosting it, and it was out of state, so it was they called them consortiums in that state. She was the head of the consortium, and she said, let's go to lunch. And I said, well, I really don't like to leave. And she said, no, there's a place right down the street, and it's quick, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, it got to be about 5 minutes before we were supposed to start. That's unsettling for me because I want to be calm and relaxed when people come back to begin the program because I'm respecting their time that way. And I said, I really have to go. I'll just call her Susan. I said, Susan, I really have to get back. I need to leave. If I'll give you money. No, I'm treating you. Well, that's great, but I have to go. And she said, don't worry about it. You're with me. And I said, but I need to respect their time. And that's the exact verbiage that I used. I was in a program once as a participant, and this was after I started doing training. At that time, I would still go out and do face-to-face training with other people just to get a feel for what they were doing and how they were handling themselves. And I used it as a training session for me. And we were in this training, and I was sitting there, and it was 1 o'clock, and we were supposed to get started after lunch, and it was 1:05, and the trainer still wasn't there, and it was 1:10, and the trainer still wasn't there, and it was about 11 minutes after. She comes dragging her suitcase up the aisle, and she said, oh, sorry about that. I was on the phone with a client. You know how that is. And I immediately created a barrier because I was a client. I had paid $169 to attend that session but it taught me $169 worth of stuff. I don't get on the phone with clients at lunch. I will tell clients, if you call me during the day on Tuesday when I'm training, I probably won't be able to return your call until Wednesday because I don't want to jeopardize the people that have, even though you may not actually, quote, pay money to be there because you belong to an MLC here in Florida or wherever, I still want to value your time and I don't want to show up late. So valuing people's time is very important and can be a very subtle show of either respect or disrespect. Number 30 says, be patient with people. Maybe they are older, maybe they are younger, maybe they don't understand because you're from Mars and they're from Venus. Maybe you are an introvert and they're an extrovert. Whatever it is, be patient with those people. That's showing respect for them. There are lots of times people need to show patience with me because of my personality or whatever it might be. Be patient. Don't interrupt them. It's disrespectful. I will tell you that this is one that I can circle for myself because as a human being, I do find myself interrupting people, especially if they hesitate for a word or something that, oh, remember that program we did, and I will fill in the blank, when really I should wait another second or two to see if they're going to fill in the blank. This is a hard one, folks. But if you do it all the time and know that you do it all the time, have somebody help you be accountable so that you don't do it as much. I don't know of anybody who doesn't do it to some extent. Sometimes because we don't even realize they're going to be saying something and we pop something in there right over the top of what they were saying without even knowing that they were going to say that. That's understandable, isn't it? But you know those people. It's the people that interrupt you as you're talking and maybe even go off on a different tangent. So be very careful of that. Now, do you maybe need to ask questions from time to time to either draw them back to what the point is they're trying to make or to get more information? Certainly, that's acceptable. You could even say, you could hold up one finger and say, could I ask you a question real quick? And then ask the question. But to just keep interrupting shows disrespect. I always tell people, remember to take some of this information and use it in your personal life. For me, this is one I can use in my personal life. The longer you know somebody, the easier it is to fill in the blanks for them. The more you do that, the more disrespectful it becomes. My husband would tell you a story about a situation he was in with a boss. He was working for a friend of his at the time, helping him out with something. And the friend was saying something, and the thought came into my husband that he had experienced that and could answer this thing that this friend was talking about. So he just started talking. The friend looked him in the eye and said, I guess I was finished. And my husband never forgot that. And I told him, I said, I use that as an example in programs sometimes because it's so pointed. It happens to all of us, doesn't it? So now when he and I are talking and one of us interrupts our train of thought, the other one will look at us and say, I guess I was finished. And we always laugh because we know where that comes from, but it is disrespectful, isn't it? So we need to be careful about that. Anthony says sometimes it's also in our eagerness to help. Absolutely. We anticipate, which is a wonderful thing. Maybe just that little warning of, I think I have your answer would help instead of just jumping in and interrupting, right, Anthony? But you're exactly right. You're eager to help. You already have the answer, but sometimes when we assume that we have the answer, we're actually addressing something that they're not going to ask. So there's kind of a catch-22 there. And sometimes just trying to let them know that you think you might be on track here will show respect, and you can go ahead and interrupt and give them the information that you thought might be helpful. And then kind of monitor that. Most of the time, are you interrupting appropriately and is it helpful? Or most of the time, have you guessed wrong and that maybe you need to back off of that a little bit? So as I said, I don't expect you to quit it completely. Just be very aware of if it's a habit where you're doing it instinctively and you're running over the top of somebody. Totally different, isn't it, Anthony, than being eager to help. People will sense that you're eager to help. They'll also sense if you're running over the top of them because you want to talk about your issue, your answer, whatever it might be. Don't try to downplay their feelings. This lady at the chair store just dismissed me completely. I didn't have any feelings as far as she was concerned. The frustration in my voice should have given her an indication right now I need to do something to settle this right at the beginning. And I'm serious, folks, if she would have said, I am so sorry that happened. Occasionally in transit, something works its way loose. We can get somebody out there on Friday. And then she would have told me the time. And if she just would have given me that 15-minute window, we would have been good to go. But she downplayed my feelings. The fact that I just spent $1,100 on a chair, I've never done that before in my life, probably won't ever do it again. That's a lot of money to me. And the fact that I had just spent that and after 5 days it was broken should have, I would have thought, encouraged her to express some empathy and apologize and then move on with the conversation. But she downplayed that. My feelings were non-existent. There was no empathy shown. And I almost felt like it might have had something to do with where we live in a retirement community because that was one of her comments. I see that you're in, and she named the retirement community. And I wanted to say, which I was so flustered with the whole situation, I didn't, but I wanted to say, what's that got to do with anything? Well, I think she made a judgment. Whether she did or didn't, it felt disrespectful. So we need to be very careful about that. Be self-aware and socially aware. I touched on emotional intelligence earlier, but this is 2 components of emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman's description. It's self-awareness, understanding your emotions. The socially aware part comes into play of understanding their emotions, but also understanding how your emotions are influencing their emotions. So you have to be self-aware first to understand how your emotions are showing up and how they're influencing other people, and then tap into that and say, you know what, my frustration just poured out onto that person, and that is not going to move us forward here. That's being socially aware. Or this person seems to be so upset that I need to back off of this a little bit. I'm more in tune with their emotions and showing empathy with them. Ask what else you can help with. What else can I do for you today? Did you know about this author? Have you thought about coming to this program? Don't create unnecessary rules and policies. I see that, Marcia. No problem. I thought, is she drawing us a picture or what? No problem. I have a sneaking suspicion something was laying on your keyboard. If you're like me, I do that occasionally. I look up and there's a whole bunch of weird little symbols on there. So I understand. Do you see the word unnecessary there? All libraries require rules and policies, but I think sometimes we go, this happened, we have to make a rule or a policy and punish everybody else. It's sort of like when the supervisor puts out a memo and says, I've noticed that some of you are coming in late and there's only one person that's coming in late. You have 15 people and everybody gets punished. Please step back and show respect for the fact that you have patrons who want to be good to your library, who want to be good patrons, all of the above, and yet you create rules and policies that punish everybody. Maybe it's something that you can handle on an individual basis instead of creating this overarching rule that makes people feel when they walk into your library like you're shaking your finger at them immediately. Maybe it can be addressed individually instead. Resolve complaints quickly and thoroughly. No sense letting that hang out there. I've had times when somebody has said, oh yeah, I see that this happened, and then a week later I have to follow up on it. That is very frustrating. You're not valuing my time if you make me follow up a second time. So that's why I said resolve complaints quickly and thoroughly. Don't treat patrons as an interruption, and sometimes our biases on diversity can come into play here, where we react to some groups differently than we react to other groups. And again, that could be age, gender, generation, race, culture, introvert, extrovert, it could be any number of things. But sometimes we treat people as an interruption based on the measure of diversity compared to ourselves. Don't make them feel stupid about any questions they might have. And I think the people that have English as a second language really get the brunt of this, because sometimes they may not express it as we expect them to express it. And I didn't say correctly because it's not correct just because we happen to express it that way. So I think some people with that diversity probably suffer with this more than others, because we don't mean to make them feel stupid, but maybe we roll our eyes or have to repeat it 2 or 3 times or whatever, and it can come across as being disrespectful very easily. Here's the whole key, what we're wrapping this up with respect. Diane says, I'm learning as we age that there may be a hearing issue and it's not always apparent. Absolutely, Diane. And it doesn't mean they're going to run out and get a hearing aid for your convenience. They may struggle with that for a long time or always because they don't want to do that. And maybe we can speak more clearly and not shout at them necessarily. But it's amazing when I see the difference in the people, even in our healthcare system, when they see differences in ages, how differently older people are treated. And I put air quotes in that. You can't see me, but I put older in air quotes just for our benefit, because as I age, I've noticed that people almost pat me on the head. And I certainly am not in an age group where I feel like I need patted on the head, nor will I be 30 years from now, because I think it's inappropriate. But people give you that attitude like, oh, it's okay, honey. And that's disrespectful as far as I'm concerned. Marcia said, what if the question is, do you have info on the country of Africa? You just say, I've got information on Africa. Right, Marcia? That's it. I've got information on Africa for you. Here you go. So you may need to educate a little bit while you're doing that, but it has to be in a respectful manner, doesn't it? Yeah, I bet it was a crazy 5 minutes. Treat your patrons as honored guests. If you do that, you will show respect. You can't not show respect if you're treating them as honored guests, right? That's what respect is about. It doesn't matter if you go back to page 1 of your handouts. It doesn't matter which version of diversity they have, because they will have something even if it's not on our list. If you treat them as an honored guest, then you will show the respect that you would want to be shown. I think that's an area where the golden rule does apply. Everybody wants to be shown respect. It may be in a different manner for one person to the next, which is the platinum rule, where you want to treat them as they want to be treated, but certainly showing them as an honored, treating them as an honored guest would show respect for them. Now, my question for you is, I don't know what happened. There you go. Popped back off again. But my question for you is, what have you thought about today regarding respect that you haven't given much thought to before? Would you just jot yourself a note? And if you'd like to join us in the chat box, that would be great. I would love to see what you've thought about. No problem, Erin. I'm used to seeing that on Adobe. I've got some other clients that use it. Okay, Abby, thank you. Good luck with your conference call. But what have you thought about regarding respect? And the next question is probably the most important. What might you become more intentional about showing respect? What could you become more intentional about in showing respect? Abby says the hearing issue, both for them and us. Yes. And Jan says don't interrupt, or at least try to limit it. Right, Jan? Listening more. I think listening is a huge, well, as I said on that first quote, it's the best way to show respect, isn't it? Listening and stop interrupting. Yes, those are all things that all human beings struggle with. Oh, Luli, thank you. Me too. Not arguing and having to win, because how's that working for you? You know, usually when we're debating it, we may feel like we've won in the moment, but afterwards we know that we've just created another barrier. Yeah, it isn't. It doesn't work for us that well, and I'm a victim of that. I think worked on it some over the past several years, but certainly I'm not where I would like to be. So thank you, everybody. I know we're out of time. You have my contact information. If you need anything from me, please just drop me an email, and I'd be more than willing to help you with anything I can, any of the subjects we've talked about with diversity or any of the other topics that I handle. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I look forward to seeing you again in the future. Let it go. Right, Luli. Let it go. We don't need to debate people. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, Linda, for a wonderful webinar. We are very lucky to have been able to participate in this learning opportunity. Some great information and a sneak peek of what's coming up. I would like to tell you guys about some webinars coming up next month. We have on April 10th, Patron-Driven Acquisitions. It will be hosted by Dr. Naomi Gold. So if you have any interest in that topic, please join us. On the 17th of April, we have our part 2 of our Successful Providing Understanding and Resources for Patients with Disabilities webinar, hosted by Dr. Stephanie Rollins. And our next DDI webinar will be on the 24th, S is for Stereotypes, and that will also be hosted by Linda Bruno. And our final webinar will be April 30th, and that will be Copyright and Fair Use for Libraries. So feel free to register now, and also keep checking our calendar online at swiftland.org for any opportunities you may be interested in. Join our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, or look for your message on the listserv. And hope everybody has a great day and a great weekend.